Austin Simmons got disrespected by a national analyst because, honestly, he probably doesn't know any better.
You are Locked On Ole Miss, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to the Locked On Ole Miss Podcast, the most watched Ole Miss podcast around. I am your host, Steven Willis, a 10-year veteran member of the national media and a former Ole Miss staff member. On today's show, we discuss one of the worst takes I have ever seen on Twitter, and that is actually saying something. Brandon Marcello took to the Texags airwaves to say the SEC has a quarterback problem from the middle of the pack down. Whether it's a run-of-the-mill talking season hot take or proof that he doesn't understand what he's talking about, we break all of that down. We bring in Josh Pate's top SEC quarterbacks list to show why the top two-thirds of the league is actually pretty strong at that position. It doesn't look that different than it normally does. We also talk about the Big Ten, who is going to be predicted to be the top performers at quarterback in the Big Ten. And finally, I got my first magazine previewing college football this season, and lo and behold, it's filled with anonymous quotes. I hate anonymous quotes. There's a serious credibility issue in today's media, and those gimmicks are exactly why. Remember, we're free and available on all the podcast apps and on YouTube. Thank you for making Locked On Ole Miss your first listen every day, and a special hello to the insiders and everydayers who make the show what it is. And don't forget to check out a second listen on the network. Chris Gordy at Locked On SEC or Corey Burton at Locked On Vandy offer even more perspectives on college football, the SEC, and all things potentially Ole Miss. We'll see what they have to say. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when that first $5 bet wins. So let's talk horrible takes and Austin Simmons getting disrespected. Brandon Marcello was on Texags Radio or Texags Live or whatever they call that. It's the Billy Liucci thing that they do in Texas. And he's a national analyst going on, and he said this: I think there's a quarterback problem in the SEC from the middle of the pack down. What that essentially means is that after the first two or three quarterbacks, there's nothing to fall back on. There's not going to be any depth in the league. There's all sorts of problems. It is a symptom of the media when they don't know ball, they lean on analytics. So if there's unknowns, it is absolutely detrimental to their takes. And they build their whole talking season off season, predicting narratives for the college football season based off of these unknown takes that they make in June and July. And Brandon Marcello obviously does not think very highly of the SEC quarterbacks after probably two or three. Now, keep in mind, this is probably the same person that put Arch Manning number one or DJ Lagway number one. Neither one of those quarterbacks have a lot of take. It's just him going along with other media members are saying. These are all symptoms of not knowing ball. The question is, where is he getting this from? Is this an opinion that he made himself? Is this something that he's heard somewhere? Because I haven't heard that. And as a part of all of this, Austin Simmons and Lane Kiffin kind of get lumped in with the middle of the pack to the bottom of the pack quarterbacks of the SEC. And Austin Simmons is potentially the most talented quarterback that Lane Kiffin has ever had, period. End of story. He has all the talent in the world. He is just unproven. The only time we've seen him for an extended run was the Georgia game a year ago. And lo and behold, Austin Simmons led them directly down the field for a touchdown and got Ole Miss back in that game. And eventually Ole Miss would win that game in large part because of Austin Simmons. So when you look at this, this is the stuff about the national media. And there's going to be a whole lot of media bashing going on today by me. I apologize for that. But between the Athlon magazine and this, it is a situation where the media is just kind of saying something without knowing what they're talking about. In the Texas-Georgia game a year ago, Arch Manning got put in. He threw for 15 yards. He had a fumble. He did not look particularly good, got yanked back out of the game. In a similar situation, playing at home, Austin Simmons gets thrust into the ball game, leads Ole Miss down for a touchdown, and comes out of the game when Jackson Dart comes back onto the field. Two quarterbacks, two really similar experiences, two different results. But one of those quarterbacks, Arch Manning, is the number one quarterback on the board and the number one All-SEC quarterback, first team quarterback of the Athlon College Football Preview magazine, by the way. Austin Simmons, nowhere to be found. He's going to be good. Ole Miss fans are very fired up about him, and that's honestly, if we're going to be real about this, that's what's important. But so many of these yahoos are basically stealing oxygen to try and say whatever they want to say. There's no football knowledge of them. He's probably a former writer at some site somewhere and has just written his way to the top by knowing his cliches. He's probably a very nuclear type writer. And all of the media members, it's a very tight-knit cabal to where they talk and they tell each other what other people are saying. And it's a big circle that whenever they say they're hearing something from another media personnel. And somebody's going to say, I don't know what I'm talking about. I've worked at Yahoo Sports. My degree says broadcast journalism. I worked at Channel 4 in Nashville, Tennessee. I am very much aware of how this works. And it turns into a little bit of self-flatulation or something like that. And I don't know if he just doesn't know any better, if he is extremely just trolling for clicks, or he just doesn't know ball. Like if you bring up Josh Pate, which I think they're the same organization. They both work for CBS 24/7. And this is Josh Pate's 2025 SEC preseason quarterback rankings. Of course, he does the DJ Lagway and the Arch Manning thing. Okay, whatever. I'm not going to fight those too much longer. It's just not. We're almost to the season. Lenore Sellers, Garrett Nussmeier, John Mateer. That's probably the top third of the league right there. All pretty good quarterbacks, all very well-regarded quarterbacks. They are also the only quarterbacks where there's real film of the newcomers. So if you have a newcomer that is pretty fired up, you're probably going to put him next. Austin Simmons comes up number 6 on Josh Pate's list, 9 on Brandon Marcello's list. Jackson Arnold, a former 5-star who has a chance to be a really good player that struggled at Oklahoma when his whole offensive line got hurt a year ago and all of his wide receivers, everybody would have struggled in that situation. He's at Auburn. He has a chance to be pretty good. Taylon Green has athletic ability out the wazoo, and Bobby Petrino as an offensive coordinator. So we'll see exactly what happens there. Marcel Reed, he needs to pick up the passing game. He will pick up the passing game. He's a very highly thought of quarterback out of Montgomery Bell Academy. Good player. Diego Pavia, number 10. That kind of lets you know that the SEC is in really, really good shape when it comes to quarterbacks. That's the top 2/3 of the league. If Diego Pavia is the 10th rated quarterback, the SEC is pretty set. And that, again, was the same organization I think Brandon Marcello is attached to. His take, and we'll go back and bring it up one more time. I think there's a quarterback problem in the SEC from the middle of the pack down. This is a quote of somebody that doesn't know what they're talking about. And just to put it in perspective, these are the highest rated returning quarterbacks in the Big Ten. Okay? If the SEC has a quarterback problem from the middle of the pack down, what about any situation where an Iowa quarterback is the top returning passer? Drew Allar is the second rated quarterback. He's going to look really good against Toledo. He's going to look awful against Ohio State. Nico Iamaleava, who did not look good in the SEC last season. We know that. He was probably the 8th or 9th or 10th rated quarterback in the SEC, number 3 in the Big Ten. Fernando Mendoza, the transfer from Cal. The kid from Rutgers, I'm not going to say his name. He's a transfer from Minnesota. And then Luke Altmaier, our good friend Luke Altmaier, comes in at number 6. He should be higher on this list, I think. But I think Luke's going to have a big year for Illinois this year. But nobody's writing super think pieces about the Big Ten having a problem at quarterback. Nobody's writing those. Nobody's saying that. Nobody understands exactly how football works. And there's going to be good players. They're going to be able to make plays. But Brandon Marcello's take, it was an awful, awful, awful take. You know, Marcello might not be entirely to blame, but that take is flat out wrong. We break it down and decide, has something really changed from year past? Or is this just another case of trolling for clicks? Stick around. NBA playoffs are in full swing, and every night delivers highlight-worthy performance, major momentum shifts, and can't-miss moments. Whether it's a game-winning shot or a breakout player, there's never been a better time to get in on the action. FanDuel makes it easy to stay in the game before tip and live with player props, performance trends, same-game parlays. Fans have more ways than ever to play smart and win big. I know baseball is a 4-letter word to Ole Miss fans right now. But over in MLB, Spencer Torkelson and Riley Green are kind of tearing it up. They're leading the best record team in baseball. Maybe a same-game parlay would work for you there. Maybe Ole Miss, if you want to bet on football, if you're ready to go, they come in as a 37.5-point favorite over Georgia State in the latest FanDuel odd. If you're new to FanDuel, it is the perfect time to sign up. Head to FanDuel.com and place your first $5 bet. If it wins, you'll get $200 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. So it got me thinking, and unknowns are the enemy of the journalist, of the sports writer. If you don't know what's going to happen, you can't predict what's going to happen, which means there's a lot of chances for you to step out on a ledge and look like a fool. And the journalist hates looking like a fool. They hate that more than anything. That is the reason they're so wishy-washy. That's the reason they say they're always right. If you know of any journalist that always does that, that is why. They do not want to look like a fool. They want to always be on the winning side of every debate. That's rule number 1 of sports writing. So Brandon Marcello stepping out on this ledge is simply because of unknown. And when journalists look at something, they automatically look at the negative side of it as they bleed. If it bleeds, it leads type situation. And that way they have a good chance of being right. So at the end of the year, if for some reason quarterbacks get hurt, they end up not winning the national title, we can look back and say, I told you so. I had this performance on TexAgs to where I talked about the quarterback problem that the SEC had. This is all laying groundwork of what's going on. But is this season really any different than last year or seasons past? What is the difference between a normal SEC season and 2025? I think the number one thing that has people scared to step out on a ledge with the SEC is new quarterbacks at Georgia and Alabama, new quarterbacks at Ole Miss and Tennessee, where you're leaning on new quarterbacks at Texas, a true sophomore that's coming off an injury at Florida, new quarterback at Oklahoma. They're all new quarterbacks. They might have history, they might have talent, but there is a chance that they fall through and gives him an opportunity to say, I told you so at the end of the year. But if you look at talent and potential, Georgia, Alabama, Ole Miss, Tennessee, Texas, everybody is going to perform at a level pretty normal to what they always do. When Jalen Hurts ended up at Alabama, he was replaced mid-season by Tua. SEC quarterbacks are a little bit different. They've put up numbers at a very high level over the last 15, 20 years. This isn't a situation to where if you lose a quarterback, it is problematic. In the NIL world, there is a backup on each and every roster that is comparable to what is a starter on a Big 12 or an ACC roster, save Cade Klubnik. The SEC backup roster is good, but now in this age where there's not much access, granted, and this is the problem that the media has with access, if we're going to be real about it. You have no idea how good the players coming up are. You don't really care, but you don't even have a chance to get a glimpse, a chance to get impressed, a chance to file something away for the future. That is the difference between now and football 10 years ago. The Nick Sabanification of college football has been complete. So Brandon Marcello, he's kind of is what he is. That is an all-timer bad take. I will say that. And like I said, this is probably a similar person that has Arch Manning very high on his board, but talks about the downgraded quarterbacks in the second half of the league, when it could be argued that the SEC is not as top-heavy as it has been, but there's more depth at quarterback than at any time in the last 10 or 15 years. When Diego Pavia on Josh Pate's list is coming in at number 10, there's depth in that league. When Blake Shapen, who was the starting quarterback, I believe, at Baylor, is not even on the list. Now, Zach Calzada's a two-time SEC washout. Okay. Bro Pribula, okay, I get it. He's going to be a good player, though. He threw a touchdown pass against Ole Miss in the Peach Bowl a couple of years ago. He's going to be good. If you look at depth, Joey Aguilar, transfer from Appalachian State, went to UCLA. Whenever Nico went to UCLA, Aguilar went to Tennessee. I think Aguilar at Tennessee is probably a chance to be a better quarterback than Nico would have been at Tennessee. There is a ton of depth in the entire SEC at quarterback, period. And if you don't think so, you probably don't know ball, and you just take a look at unknowns and just assume that it's going to fail because you've been trained that way. That's the way that has been instilled into your mind. So we'll see exactly how that goes over the next, 3 or 4 months of what's happening. Anyway, in our final segment, the Athlon college football preview is out. It's full of anonymous takes once again, and the author of the Ole Miss write-up is not clearly identified. We have unpacked what was said and why it matters coming up next. All right, so today I went out and got the Athlon College Football Preview magazine, which, by the way, Publix are starting to do away with magazine racks, if that kind of lets you know how much of the digital age we're in at the moment. I had to go to 3 different locations to just find a magazine rack. In that magazine, the rack, once I got it, I got the College Football Preview for Athlon Sports. Has Ole Miss at number 18. On the outside looking in for the playoff. But the one thing you notice in this magazine is how disjointed it is. Used to back in the day, like whenever I was a kid picking up these magazines, this is some of the most fun that I had, is picking this up in June. Everything was kind of linked. A player position group was in a certain area because certain All-Americans and all SEC level players are there, and they rank all of that. The one thing I got out of reading this magazine is that it was very disjointed, to where it was obvious that 5 different people wrote it and there was no conversations about it. So Ole Miss is number 18 in the national rankings. But if you look at position unit rankings, they come in no better than 5th. And a few player positions at the double-digit level. When you look at the depth chart, which is hilarious because there hasn't been a depth chart in several years at Ole Miss, but they just guessed one to put one in, it makes it look like Ole Miss is struggling. Whenever you see the positions that are happening at Ole Miss, If you just read the write-up, you say, oh my goodness, this team's going 6-6 this year. When you read the national rankings, like, well, 18th in the nation and right on the edge of where Tennessee, A&M, and LSU are, and one of those teams is likely going to the college football playoff, it doesn't match up. And that was my first problem with the Athlon college football preview. They have them predicted 7th in the SEC. I don't have a problem with that. The national ranking I have no problem with, but it's the stuff that's granular that I do. They even listed Lane Kiffin as the 8th most likely coach to win his first national championship coming up. So it's very disjointed. I recommend if you read it one at a time, or else you will be confused as heck of what's going on. But I did want to let you know that as well. The other thing that drives me on batty are the anonymous quotes of opposing SEC coaches. I hate anonymous quotes. Remember, I have a journalism degree. Remember, I've worked at WSMV in Nashville. I've worked at Yahoo Sports. I've worked in the media business. I know what anonymous quotes are there for. This is not that. And I'll just put the quote up. I think Michael Bratton at that SEC podcast found it, said, an anonymous coach comments on Ole Miss and Athlon Sports, college football magazine. The first program in the league that went all in on portal players to take them to a playoff bid went bust. Okay. And also the loss at Florida last year is an example why Lane Kiffin isn't considered an elite coach. Here's the problem I have with this, okay? If he truly is an assistant coach in the SEC, and this is just not a made-up quote, because both of these quotes sound like something that a journalist would write in a story or a journalist would want to write. So is the anonymous coach thing a way for them to just completely make up a quote? Or is it a situation to where the anonymous coach is saying something and there's no way that an anonymous coach would say that about Lane Kiffin? You know why? Because if he is an assistant coach, he wants a job at Ole Miss. The jobs at Ole Miss and what they do is one of the better jobs in the entire country, the way they have it broken down. There's the reason. There's dogs all in there. They have fun. The brand is there. If an anonymous assistant coach said that, there's no way he'd put his name on that. And that means there's no way he means it, because he probably wants to work there. He wants his career to take off. But if this is a made-up quote, this gives journalists cover to write something like that, to have another egregious hot take of what's going on. The Florida game was not a problem. If you lose a game in the swamp, that is not a problem. Just the week before, they beat LSU. Florida was a good team. If this was a real thing and something to be taken seriously, they would have talked about the Kentucky game. That is the reason he is not known as an elite coach. If you do that, nobody would say a thing about it, and you would probably get away with it. But the fact you went Florida means something altogether different. Whoever you played after that upset against Georgia was going to be tough to beat. Just was. The Kentucky game was inexcusable. I don't like anonymous quotes. Again, journalism degree, I know what they're there for. I know what's there, but I don't like that in regards to a college football preview. This is just a way to TMZ it, just a way to sling mud, just a way to gossip, as opposed to putting out real information. Remember, this was very disjointed. The national rankings are different. It's all different. It was obviously written by 5 different people, and they didn't talk. But we'll see when Lindy's comes out. We'll talk about that as well. I don't have high hopes. I'll put it to you like that. I am not someone that has high hopes on this. Thank you for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your go-to source for Ole Miss sports. We pride ourselves on offering the most comprehensive perspectives, which is why we're the #1 Ole Miss podcast out there. Your support means the world to us. For your second listen, check out the Portal Show. Brian Smith has the latest rumors, portal entries, and signings. Be the most informed fan on the rapid changes to the college football landscape. Find the Portal on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. Michael Katz, obviously, if you know that, he was not on last night's show. We're going to try and get him tonight. We have trouble with technology getting it to line up. So hotty toddy, everybody. And remember, analytics is just the old English word that means bad football. We'll see you tomorrow.